All right, guys, it is officially Dallas week, so I'm going to go ahead and start my videos for this week. And we're going to start off with a little Carson Wentz advanced passing analytics. Hey, man, there's a couple storylines that really emerge when you look at the advanced passing analytics. And I wanted to talk for a few minutes today, kind of break down what I'm seeing. And then I'll show you a couple pieces of film. We're not going to go deep into film today, guys, but nonetheless, without further ado, let's get into it. What's up, Eagles Nation? What's going on, NFL world? How you doing, division rivals? This is Stephen Hyder with Gate City Sports Channel, the sports channel where the cerebral NFL fan comes for about 10 minutes of daily content. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever it is you get around to watching us. Once again, guys, my name is Stephen Hyder, and this is Gate City Sports Channel. All right, y'all. Carson Wentz, advanced analytics. Let's talk in depth about the season, where he stands right now on the season with a lot of these numbers, okay? Time to throw. 2.9 seconds. That's a very high, guys. As a matter of fact, that's the 8th most time to throw in the league. It's not a good stat. It's not a bad stat. It's just a stat, okay? It means that on average, he's taking almost 3 seconds to throw the ball. Some of this is due to offensive line play. Some of this is due to play development. I will say this. It's hard to judge this just know that even though he's 8th in the league there, 2 quarterbacks that are ahead of him are the 2 quarterbacks that are number 1 and number 2 in most people's minds, right? Which is Patrick Mahomes and then Russell Wilson. So it's really hard to know where to take that one other than to say that we could run film where there are times that, at times you can see he's holding the ball a little too long when he should get rid of the football. Perfect example.
Just a few weeks ago, Wentz has to pull it down. Now he's in trouble.
With that said, it's not always about that, right? Like, we're talking about moments. We're talking about these small moments and times where we're like, we got to be like, okay, Carson, you got to be better than that in this moment, all right?
4-man rush. Wentz bounces away, looking, and down he goes.
But overall, I want to look at the production we're getting for holding the ball that long. Completed air yards, 6.3. Okay, that's 13th in the league, right? So he's starting to trend away from the middle of the pack back towards those top 12, top 10 kind of numbers where if you're going to hold the ball for almost 3 seconds, the completed air yards needs to match that time, to throw with the intended air yards, in my opinion. Like, those three need to be together. Intended air yards, 9.2. That's the 8th most in the league. So he is throwing the ball down the field. It's not a surprise, right? There are a few games I want to discuss in depth to where we can see that they sped Carson up, right? Where they shrank down the amount of time he had to throw the ball, and they developed much shorter route trees for the young man throwing that football, and we can see that those were not the greatest games of the season, to be honest. All right, aggressive percentage. Your aggressive percentage being the percent of time that you throw into what they deem tight coverage, right? So where there's less than 1 yard of separation between corner and receiver. 16.9%, which is dead smack around the middle of the league at like 15th, okay? He's not overly aggressive. He's not under aggressive. I will say there's one game in particular, though, that Carson, he didn't have any choice just because the defense is really good and he was fully aggressive. And we'll get to that in a minute. Air yards to the sticks, exactly 0. Air yards to the sticks means on measurement, exactly how close are you coming to the first down marker. Carson is throwing right at it at exactly 0 now. That's a really good measurement to know the route developments, things like that, right? Because air yards to the sticks takes a lot of things into consideration, guys. So it's taking all your throws, but past that it's taking into consideration like things like penalties, right? Because although you might have a negative 2.1, if you're constantly having to start drives off with 1st and 15 or 1st and 20, of course your air yards to the sticks number is going to get affected by that. And there were a few games this season to where it was greatly affected, to where he had large negative numbers, okay? But there are also games where he's got large positive numbers, and we see that bouncing out to a 0. All right, QB rating on the season, he's currently ranked 26. We're seeing that momentum, that progression coming, forward. Obviously, we don't want Listen, I'm not a huge QB rating guy. I think that QBR and QB rating are highly flawed. Both of them are. But with that said, it does become hard to justify a 26th ranking, but at least it's moving in the correct way. Clearly, we want to see Carson start coming back down to the top 12. Like, that has to happen. or else we'll be dead in the water if he doesn't start moving back down towards that top 12. All right. In games in particular I want to talk about, okay? Let's talk about last weekend against the New York Giants. What went on here? Time to throw, 2.99 seconds. 3 seconds to throw the ball, okay? Completed air yards, 9.3. That's a really good, impressive stat that these 3 games I'm going to talk to you about right now, I think say a lot about Fulgham and Wentz. Like, getting Rager back to team with Fulgham, to team with, Rodgers and Goddard and these guys, like, it's going to help a lot, guys. Like, I can see this stuff coming out on paper.
Wentz has time, loads it up. Going deep down the field for Jalen Rager. He's got
intended air yards, 9.8. So intended, 9.8 on average. Completed, on average, 9.3 yards. Pretty solid. Aggressive percentage, so the amount of times he had to throw into tight coverage. Mind you, they were playing cover 2 with a man under, so you're expecting the throws to be difficult, but not necessarily that the coverage will be within 1 yard at all times. It's just that you're going to have an over-the-top and an under defender that you have to fit into. So, as a result, 11.6%. 11.6% of the time he was throwing into coverage last week that was deemed 1 yard or less, okay?
Wentz throws, passes.
Air yards to the sticks, 0.3, so obviously he's thrown just past the first down marker on average. And then his quarterback rating was a 91.1. All right, I want to also talk about week 6 and week 5 because I think that just shows you Fulgham being implemented in the offense and what it has done. Okay, week 6, time to throw, 3.27 seconds. He's actually holding the ball longer with Fulgham in the game because Fulgham can actually get open. That's part of it. The offensive line has a lot to do with this too, guys, but it's a lot harder to isolate that component. Completed air yards, 7.3 in week 6. Okay, so we went from 3.27 to 7.3 completed air yards. Now, mind you, this is against a really good Baltimore defense, so I think that plays into this a little bit. Intended air yards were 10.3. So definitely he was throwing down the field. He wasn't quite getting the same results, though, with the completed versus the intended. His aggressive percentage. Once again, you're playing a good defense, right? You know that the coverage is going to be tighter now. 22.5%. That's high. It's not ridiculously high, but that's high. That means that there was tight coverage there that he had to throw into. His air yards to the stick, so I always tell you guys it's a really good measurement of how far down the field you're throwing because it takes into account like setbacks to the offense. 0.6. 0.6. So almost a full yard pass almost if you rounded it up. So
Wentz puts some mustard on it and hits full.
We can see that Carson is pushing the ball downfield, and I think Fulgham is a big part of that. Quarterback rating, 84.7 in that game. We can see Carson keeps constantly coming up from these games. All right, week 5. So now we've gone 7, 6, and 5. This was against Pittsburgh, probably the best defense in the league, to be honest. Time to throw, 2.85 seconds. So they did speed him up a little bit there, but even 2.85 seconds is a little longer than we were seeing down the stretch last season from Carson. Like, they definitely shortened the windows. So what's going on currently is a little different from last season, although it's still a story of unknowns that you have to go deep in your scouting, know who these guys are, coming in and playing these positions. Completed air yards against Pittsburgh, 10.3. Fulgham had a huge role in that.
3rd down and 12. As Wentz fires and
intended air yards, 13.6. That was the highest on the year, beating even Washington's numbers. The Washington game number. Aggressive percentage. This is the one where I was like, wow. Like, this is hero ball, guys. There's no way of putting this any other way. 37.1%. 37% of all passes in week 5 against the Pittsburgh Steelers Wentz threw into coverage, or had to throw into coverage, depending on your perspective here, guys. 37% of those passes. Okay? We're talking higher than a 1-in-3 ratio. He had to throw into tight coverage. So at least once every series, basically, he had to throw into coverage. That's really deemed tight, 1 yard or less. Air yards to the sticks. This is a huge stat number. This is how far past the sticks he was throwing. 3.7 yards. No, you could see, you get a Fulgham with a 150-yard game, you kind of expect some of these numbers to happen, right? His QB rating was a 75.7, which was respectable against probably the best defense in the league, but nonetheless, you want to stay above 80, basically. But we can see, over those 3 games with Fulgham, we saw the progression. We saw Wentz start to emerge, okay? We go back to week 4, which was the San Francisco game. This was check down Charlie to me here. This is the game that I would deem the most check down Charlie-like game of the year. So week 4, San Francisco, time to throw. Here's the crazy thing about this. We have a time to throw, 3.28 seconds. Dude, he held the ball in the San Francisco game more than any other game. The only one that came close was Baltimore's 3.27. All right, completed air yards. You held the ball for 3.28 seconds, and your completed air yards were 3.4 yards. Your intended air yards were 5.2 yards, okay? Your aggressive percentage was 7.1%, so you weren't throwing into tight coverage that game. Your air yards to the sticks were -3, and your quarterback rating was an 81.4 to be exact. That's the check down Charlie game to me. You could tell that we had a fear of that San Francisco pass rush getting to us. That was the game that we were max protecting with the tight ends a lot, and everything was really in front of us. We were really kind of check down Charlie in that game. We did hit one huge play to Fulgham in that game. You remember that was Fulgham's first game. We hit that beautiful one down the sideline.
18. Wentz is going to air it out deep downfield. Then it will be.
They kind of seized the momentum and took firm control of that game. All right, week 3 and week 2, I think. So basically, week 1, week 2, and week 3, guys, are the 3 weeks of those first 3 weeks of the game. You could see that of the season. That's when Carson was really being sped up, guys. This was when Carson was 3 worst games, but this was also the games to get the ball in his hands the fastest on average. All right, week 3, time to throw, 2.66 seconds. That would be the lowest on the season against Cincinnati. Some of that had to do with the fact that Cincinnati was getting home. I don't know if you guys remember that game, but Cincinnati's defensive line was getting home on us. Completed air yards were 3.4. Check down Charlie there. His intended air yards, though, were a little more than the San Francisco game, which was 6.7. His aggressive percentage was 19.1. They had good coverage. Carson was throwing into that coverage. So, literally, 1 in every 5 throws, basically, pretty close to that figure, was into coverage of 1 yard or less. Air yards to the sticks, -2.3. So the only other game that was worse than that one in terms of check down Charlieing it was the San Francisco's -3 air yards to the sticks. And his QB rating was it was the second worst of the year at 62.8. But he did have the late game heroics there in that game that I think sparked with Fulgham coming around that week 5, 6, and 7 performances. So, week 4. You got to kind of take it all into consideration with this, guys. Week 2 against the Rams, his time to throw, 2.71 seconds. Completed air yards, 4.9. Intended air yards, 6.1. Aggressive percentage, 11.6. Not bad. So, a little better ratio than 1 out of every 10 passes going into tight coverage. Air yards to the sticks, -2.1. QB rating was an abysmal 56.5. The Eagles fought in this game, and we had a chance to tie it up, but I thought this was the game I thought Carson was at his worst. The second half of the Washington game into all 4 quarters of that Rams game, I thought was the worst I've ever watched Carson play. 6 quarters of really bad football, if I'm being honest.
It's down 21-3 in this game. Wentz off play action looking for the end zone, and it's in.
Week 1 against Washington, time to throw. Once again, we're at 2.7 seconds. He's getting the ball up very fast, guys, at that rate. Completed air yards, 6.3. Intended air yards, 12. Aggressive percentage, only 9.5. Washington's a decent defense. They got a really great defensive line. They have kind of secondary. It's not bad, but it's certainly not good. Air yards to the sticks, 2.1. So he was throwing downfield. Quarterback rating, 72.5. It was medium. Here are my final thoughts on this, guys, before I close out on this analytics discussion we're having here, guys. The 3 weeks that we sped him up, he did the worst. I don't know where to put that, but it's just true. I think the one fundamental thing we can say is that we have to find a way of giving Carson enough time to create plays. Rolling the pocket, multiple motions. We need to do things that confuse the defense, give this young man enough time to diagnose and get through reads. I can promise you, at 2.66 seconds, the likelihood you're going through a 3-read progression is slim to 0. That is very difficult to do. I'm not saying that teams won't have success. Let's be real. The undefeated Pittsburgh Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger, I think the last time I checked was under 2.3 seconds. So he's not going through 3 read progressions. He knows where the ball is going to. He sees it pre-snap and he gets it out of his hands fast. I'm not saying we cannot have success that way. Other teams have had success that way with a quarterback very similar to Carson Wentz. So there's an argument to be made there. I'm not saying that, guys. What I am saying, though, is we got to find a balance between doing things like that to speed Carson up at times, right? To go no huddle, up-tempo offense, get the ball out of Carson's hands fast, with a combination of letting Carson create. We've got to blend and marriage this successfully. That's my takeaway point, guys. All right, y'all. Leave your comments down below. Let me know what you think. I know this is a little lengthy video, but this was a lot to cover, guys. So let me know your thoughts down below. You know how we end these videos. We do a little E-A-G-L-E-S. All right, y'all. Let's go, Eagles.